1. Well, me and some friends decided that we were going to try a Ouija board on the weekend of Halloween, Saturday the 28th, as my friend recently lost his mom last year, which ironically her death date was October 28th. We were surrounded by water, and we were very careful. It wasn't my first time with a Ouija board, and I had tried one before with my cousin, which was successful. Anyway, my friends knew that even though you can't really trust Ouija boards when it comes to dead relatives, they still give it a shot, to make our friend feel better. First ghost, spirit, entity we get speaks in absolute nonsense. We ask for a name, and it spells out Louis, L-U-E-Y. They ask if it goes by male pronouns, and it replies no. My friend got the bright idea to ask if it was following any of us. And it went to yes. Friend asks if it could move the planchette closest to the person it was following. And of course it has to move closest to me. I will tell you now I was not scared at all, and still am not. After a bit of questions, we learn that the first entity knew somebody from my family 2 or 3 generations ago, and lived in a military pension. Poor Louis didn't get paid what she deserved. When we asked if there was anything she wanted to tell me, it went to yes. And when asking what it was, she spells out, this is exactly what she said, we wrote it down, SYRKBYWOYOB4, which again is utter nonsense, and means nothing to any of us. We say we will try to help best we can and say goodbye. So we try again. Here is a major concern of mine, the entity, spirit, claimed to be following me around. Once again, I am not afraid of it, just concerned. And to start out, they asked if my friend's mother was there, and the pointer moved to yes. Asking for a name, it spelled out F-O-W, which is more nonsense, and we asked if it really was his mom, and of course it went to no. We asked for its real name again, and the pointer slowly spelled out G-O-D. Nope. We immediately ended it. I'd like to add I was skeptic from the start that this was a kind of ghost spirit. We had a third, where it told us it was our friend's mother, but only spelled out what her name was, Mimi, if any are interested. She was his grandmother at the same time, which he called her moments before we started the session. I really do believe the whole time it was the same entity messing with us, and never believed in the first place. I'd also like to clarify that I've always felt as if something has been watching me from far away, or following me around. I can't explain it. It just always feels like the air is thick, even at school. After I found out it actually was following me, as I felt compelled to go back to the Ouija board and talk to it even more, ask questions and the like. I can't explain that either. I'm just fascinated by paranormal and creepy things. An attraction I can't explain. I've tried alone numerous times on the board, but nothing ever responds, so I always say goodbye. I'd also like to add, as this wasn't the first time I'd done Ouija board, the last time I'd done it with my cousin successfully. The spirit spelled out nonsense and kept doing a rainbow effect of the word Lulu, much like Zozo does. It talked nothing but nonsense then too. I just wanted to share this and would like to hear your thoughts if you're reading this and are willing. 2. I'll give you a bit of background information first. I am the eldest of 3 sisters. I am 24 now. And my 2 sisters are now 20, Bethany, and 18, Erin. We first moved into this house in 1989. I had just turned 2. And it is at the end of a terrace house in Hull, England. We had a large black garden due to the fact that it previously had 2 houses next door to it that had been bombed during World War II. In our back garden you could clearly see the gateways from the gardens of the old houses that had been bricked up. The house was a 2-bedroomed house. As you went in the front door, it had a narrow hallway leading up to the stairs on the right. Just before the stairs was the door into the living room. We had a large through living room, with the kitchen at the end. Upstairs was a bathroom at the top of the stairs. Then you turned right on the landing. When you went left on the landing, you went into our parents' room. And if you went straight on, you came to mine and my sister's bedroom. When we first moved into the house, my parents said that I would wake up screaming, saying that I could see people being horrible to animals. Whether or not this was a dream or just an overact of imagination, I'm not sure, but it certainly freaked my parents out, and it seems worth mentioning. I remember when I was around 3 years old, I used to wake up and find my teddies that were on my bed the night before moved into different places around my bedroom. My parents both swear they never touched them, and even if they have moved them, I doubt they would have put them in different locations. My parents also said that when my sisters and I were all younger, we would say we saw a lady in a blue dress walk through the garden and through the wall. We all described this individually, but none of us remember seeing it. When we told my parents where we saw her, we pointed to one of the bricked-up gateways. Quite a few years went by without us really noticing anything in particular. Once I reached 10 years old, things started to get strange. Bethany was 6 and Aaron was 4. In the August of 1998, our maternal grandfather died, and our parents went through a tough period. Erin says she remembers waking up in the night on the top bunk bed and seeing a woman walk through the bedroom. She can't remember much, but she says she was all white, but she can't remember where she went when she walked through the room. I also saw a woman walk through our bedroom. However, the woman I saw had a blue dress on, and one time actually had red eyes. The timeline from now on is a bit sketchy, as so many little encounters happened, but I'll try my best to list as many as I can in chronological order. One night in bed, I was on the bottom bunk, Aaron on the top, and Bethany in a single bed across the room. Bethany jumped up and asked me who hit her in the back. Aaron was fast asleep, and I was sat in bed reading. I didn't see anything, and there's no way one of us could have hit her in the back and then run back to bed without hearing or seeing us. Bethany and I both saw a black shadow of a dark, short, stocky man. We just felt it was male. Stood in our doorway. It didn't feel particularly welcoming. This happened almost every night through our teenage years. One time we were around the ages of 19, 16, and 14. My sisters and I all sat in the living room with our pets. Our room was directly above the dining room. Our parents were out during the evening, and we heard someone running around upstairs. We double-checked, and all of our pets were downstairs. Aaron and Bethany both heard what they describe as 2 women talking, coming from our bedroom and the landing. Aaron and Bethany were asleep in bed. This is after I moved out for university, and woke up to a violent banging on the wardrobe that went on for about a minute. The thing they find oddest is after it stopped, they both just went back to sleep. Aaron heard this again 2 nights after it had first happened. Around the age of 12 to 13, I started getting small objects thrown at me when I was in our bedroom alone. They came from the top corner of the room, and were usually just small pieces of paper rolled up, or bent lolly sticks. I have absolutely no explanation for this one, but it freaked me out. Bethany and Aaron have also heard what they describe as people talking through walkie-talkies in our bedroom. They couldn't make out what was being said. There was no TV or radio on at the time. Bethany says that she often felt her bed vibrating and felt someone sit on it from time to time. I also felt someone sit on the end of my bed one afternoon. When I was 10, we adopted a dog called Zach. He passed away last year, aged 15, and was the friendliest, calmest dog you could imagine. For approximately a month, when he was about 10 years old, he would wake up during the early hours of the morning he slept in the living room, and start howling, whining and barking. This was really unlike him. Bethany went down one morning to comfort him, and while she was sat on the sofa with him, She heard things being moved about on the mantelpiece. She didn't look up to see what was happening. We also have a cat named Fergal. On 2 occasions, he would not walk past the bathroom. When my sisters went to investigate, the light bulb exploded. We also had light bulbs fall out of the sockets with the fitting totally intact. But just the glass fell out. Sorry if that doesn't make much sense. I'm not sure how else to describe it. I must point out here that we had the electrics checked twice, and both times we were told they were totally fine. Plug sockets and lights would stop and start working as when they felt like it, seemingly. Another time I was in our room with Fergal. The opposite my bed was an armchair. I was sat stroking him, and all of a sudden, he fixated on the armchair. He was a very calm, good-natured cat, but after about 30 seconds he arched his back, hissed, and ran out of the room. He wouldn't come back in that night. One evening my sisters and I had all gone to bed. Both of my parents were downstairs, and all our pets were asleep in front of the fire. Dad went into the kitchen to make himself a sandwich. He walked back into the living room to ask my mum something, and when he went back, he found a hairband with a flower attached, placed atop his sandwich. There was no way my sisters or I could have got downstairs without anyone noticing, and to this day, none of us have an explanation for this. One evening I was out. Erin was in the bathroom, Bethany was in our bedroom, and our parents were in the living room. All our family members describe hearing a howling screech throughout the house. But what was odd is that all 4 said they heard it, as if it was in the room with them. All the pets were asleep downstairs, and none of them reacted to it. Once I was in the bath, and Bethany was sat in the room with me. We were all too scared on our own, and an ornament flew off the windowsill, not just fly off, but as if it came out, then dropped. Our parents went to bed one night, and were woken up at around 3 a.m. by our mum's doll's house being rattled downstairs. The doll's house is extremely heavy, and nobody can lift it by themselves. Bethany once saw a woman dressed in pink in the garden, and also heard many odd things such as little boys playing next door, where the house would have been before being bombed, and air raid sirens on multiple occasions. Erin once heard a little boy calling her name in the garden, and when her dad said to her that there was no one around, she simply said, "Oh, must have been the ghost then." I was in the back kitchen making myself breakfast one morning, bent down to get something from the cupboard, stood up, and saw a little boy stood in the garden, looking in through the window. He then disappeared as quickly as he appeared. There was no way to get into the garden, as we always kept the gate locked. My mum had a jewellery box that belonged to our grandma who died before we were born, which sat on the landing. Bethany and I would often hear the jewellery box open, the melody would start to play, and then the lid would slam shut. This happened on many occasions, sometimes without the melody playing. There are many more things that happened. These are just some of the main ones we can remember. We heard tappings, bangings, whisperings, things being moved, and people walking around nearly every day. We moved out around 3 years ago, but we still owned the house for around 6 months after we moved out. On 2 occasions when my sisters and I went back to sort out some things we still had there, things happened. The first time we were all in the living room and in our bedroom. We had some large wicker baskets that had some of our things in. We heard these being picked up and dropped. Suffice to say, we ran out as quick as we could. On the second occasion, the last time we stepped foot in there, we were in our old room reminiscing, when we heard a man laugh and what we describe as a bowling ball being dropped on the floor next to us. It was that heavy we felt it vibrate in our stomachs. We ran downstairs, and as we were getting our bags and coats to leave, we heard a loud, "Ha!" in a mocking tone, and saw a black figure run from the front door up the stairs. 3. Hey, my name is Samantha, Sammy for short. I know that this may be a long one, but I'd like to just get it all out in one go. I have for a while now listened to many scary stories through YouTube, but never really thought about sharing my own except with friends and family. But after hearing so many accounts, I feel that I am ready to talk. I've always been interested in the paranormal and supernatural. It's most likely from hearing many tales from family members when I was a young girl, sitting under the kitchen table, listening to the adults talk about strange goings-on in the past and present. I have heard many experiences and had a few myself. The stories were mainly told by my great-great-grandmother Katie on my mother's side, as well as by other family members. The stories were usually of strange things happening on their property in rural New South Wales, which my grandmother lived on as a young woman while raising her family. There are 5 experiences that I can recall from when they lived on this property. One that she told the most often was of a time when my grandmother was home alone and heard her name called aloud by her sister Jean, who was living in Sydney. She looked around the house in response to this, but found no one else there. She became worried for her sister, but as ways of communication at that time were difficult, it took many weeks for her to get in contact with Jean. Upon eventually talking to her sister, my grandmother found out that Jean had been very ill and was in hospital. My grandmother also found out at that time she had heard her name called out was during the crisis of the illness that Jean had felt herself close to death. Another was when my great-grandfather was home alone and heard what sounded like many, many rocks being thrown on the roof of the house and rushing out to find no sign of rocks or culprits. Another was when my Nana Kate had a neighbour over for morning tea, and the lady commented that my Nan and the family must have had a great night last night. My Nan not knowing what she was talking about. The lady went on to say that last night her and her husband had heard a great party being held up at the old horse yard, and that it sounded as though everyone was enjoying themselves until early in the morning. My Nan, looking confused, stated that there had been no party and both of them were spooked. The last 2 from this property happened around the same time. It was a weekend and the kids, my grandfather and great aunts and uncles and some friends, had went to town to the new cinema and were not expected back for hours as it was a fair way to go. About an hour after they had left, my grandmother heard a car pull up out front and the sound of the kids getting out and talking and carrying on like kids do. She went out ready to ask why they were back so soon, but, as before with the rocks, found no one and no car. Later when they returned she told them, and they all found it strange. But a few times before they left the property, they would hear the sound of the car just pulling up out front, but it never being there. The last story happened the following weekend. The kids had been planning and building a huge bonfire. They had built it at the far end of the property, near the river and away from buildings for safety, and it had taken a long time to gather everything. It was the Friday, and they were planning to have it on the Saturday. That night, however, one of the family noticed something out one of the windows. It was a bonfire set alight. They all rushed to the area to douse it and see if they could find anyone or how it had lit. But they found no one. That area was isolated and you had to go by the house to get there, so they could not figure how it had happened. And the night had been cool, so it naturally catching didn't seem to fit either. Everyone was disappointed, but were more so just confused at the oddness of the situation. Another story from my mother's side, told by my great-aunt Shirley, is of the golden ceramic wall clock given to her by her son David. The clock never ran, but one day in the morning it started to tick and then stopped. Later that day she received a phone call informing her that David had been killed in a car accident at the same time which the clock had run. It also ran a while after this, but stopped the day my Uncle Robert died. I was also told of another similar incident relating to the clock and another extended family member when I was small. The clock had been an omen to my family ever since, and was watched carefully. This last story, before I get into my own experiences, came from the Aboriginal side of my family, and was told to me by my grandmother, whom we called Nana Brown, about her experience with an Australian Yowie. It is the only story from my family that I have come across involving a cryptid. When she was around 15 or 16 years old, she lived in a clearing inside a very remote valley with her family. The house was on the valley floor, which was about a 7-minute walk from the surrounding local bushland. One day she was home alone, working in the kitchen, when she looked through the window and noticed a very tall and dark figure coming out of the tree line towards the house. The figure did not appear to be wearing clothes and looked to be covered head to toe in thick brown hair. The thing was moving very fast, and with a broad gait, and within a few minutes of leaving the trees, was almost at the house. My mother started to have a very bad feeling and knew that she needed to hide. The house being only very small and consisting of the kitchen and a bedroom with a dirt floor, it was not easy to find a hiding place, but she was able to fit into a small cupboard. Within seconds of hiding, she heard the door slam open and the thing enter the house. She could hear things being thrown around and rummaged through, low sniffing and growls, then a final bang of the door and everything was silent. She waited until she was sure that it had left before coming out of hiding. The kitchen was in ruin, food crushed and scattered everywhere, and the furniture upended and scratched. There was a terrible stench in the air, and there were big footprints in the dirt. For the rest of the day she was afraid that it would return, but it never did. But on other occasions, when close to or in the bush, she regularly felt that something was near, listening and watching. As I have said, I have always been interested in the strange and spooky, and believed in otherworldly happenings. But when you actually experience something, even if it is in a way a validation of your beliefs, it still makes you feel as though you are crazy. One experience that sticks with me to this day happened when I was 21. I just recently turned 27. It happened in my house in a small rural town in New South Wales, Australia. I now live a few hours away, still in New South Wales. It was 8 o'clock at night, and I had to get something from my bedroom at the time. My house has a very short hallway, and it only takes one step from the hallway door to my bedroom door. The hallway was very dark. Instead of turning on the hallway light, I planned to turn on the bedroom light. I was in the process of the one step and reaching for the light switch when it happened. I had a sense of something jumping out at me from the darkness of the hallway. I stepped back with a scream, but nothing else happened. It was all over in a second. I was left with the image of an older man with a scruffy beard and a cobra in my mind. The only way that I can explain how the image looked to me was that it looked like his outline in white, like a Kirlian photograph. I had the feeling he was a swag man and was there to protect me. A spiritual friend later told me that she believes that he is my guide. I don't know what I saw that day, but I know what I felt, and I am still scared sometimes when I go to enter that hallway. I should also tell you that my spiritual friend believes that I have the start of this sight, and that I am an empath. I've always been able to feel the energy of a place or a person, whether they are good or not. I have also seen shadows, mostly out of the corner of my eyes, but there have been 2 occasions when I have experienced them more, shall we say, up close. Both times happened around the witching hour. 3 o'clock to those who don't know that term, and I was woken from sleep. The first time was mid-last year. I was living in an Aboriginal student housing at the time. and my bed was in the far corner of my room against the wall. I had my back to the room facing the wall when I woke suddenly with a feeling that someone or something was standing behind me. I did not turn to look, but I had the image in my head of a short, about the height of a 7-year-old, hooded figure standing at the head of my bed. It was all in black. I could only distinguish the shape and height of it. This happened in a flash. With my eyes still closed, I spun and turned my bedside lamp on and opened my eyes. No one. Nothing. I was scared, but I did not feel that the figure had meant me ill will. My second experience happened 2 months ago in my new flat. Again, I had the same feeling and woke, yet this time my bed was facing the room and opened my eyes. This time the figure was at least 7 feet tall. Still hooded, but I could see a face, a skeletal face. I screamed a noise that I have never before made and jumped for my light. Again, it was all in a flash. Nothing was there. Again, I didn't feel any ill will, but I was deeply scared and slept with the light on for the next few nights. I haven't had any more happenings, except for a few shadows fleeting here and there at the corner of my eyes. 4. After graduating college, my friend, who is also a nurse, persuaded me to move to New Orleans with her. I am originally from the Midwest, a tiny, sleepy town of less than a couple thousand people, so New Orleans was a culture shock for me. But as a 21-year-old, I loved the party scene. We both worked the 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. shift, and we'd go to work and then go party. So, the department I worked in was the emergency room. It was chaotic and crazy at times, but I am an adrenaline junkie, and it was a perfect fit. So it's a Friday night. I have less than an hour left of my shift. It's been quiet, but then all hell breaks loose. I hear 2 women screaming as they follow the stretcher of an old man as the ambulance wheels him in. The old man looked horrible. He smelt like death, literally. He had a wound on his buttocks that was literally rotting. Not to mention he had a high fever and fluid on his lungs and was pretty much drowning in his own fluids. So as I am assessing him, the 2 women are shrieking, wailing, and chanting hysterically, and the doctor tells me and another male nurse to get them out of there. So I nicely try to take the older woman's hand to lead her away, and she starts hitting me and cursing me in another language. My co-worker, a big linebacker-looking African-American gentleman named Andre, starts talking to her in what I now know was a bastardized form of French Creole. Whatever he says to her and the woman works, and they leave. We go back to helping the doctor, but then the guy codes. We do everything we can, but he dies. Andre accompanies the doctor to inform the family, and I stay back to help another nurse get ready to push the body down to the morgue. I hear screaming and I hear security being paged. Now, I am not a big guy, only 5'7", but I work out and can handle my own, so I go running, as our security guards were known for taking forever. I run to the front, and the younger woman is holding the older woman back as she, older woman, screams into the doctor and Andre's face. The younger woman ends up dragging her out, and I go up to Andre and the doctor. Andre is sweating. He looks shook, so I ask him what the lady was saying. Basically, she's blaming us for her husband's death. Andre tells us she is a practitioner of voodoo, and that she cursed us and the doctor for not saving her husband. The doctor and I laugh it off, and I go finish up before shift change. A few weeks later, I'm at work and I see a bunch of my co-workers are crying and upset. The doctor, who I will call John, had a massive cerebral hemorrhage. He died in his sleep. I honestly chalked it up to freak happenstance. He was young and very healthy, but things happen. However, later that day, Andre catches me in the cafeteria. He tells me that the doctor died because of the curse and one of us was next. I am not superstitious in the least bit. I brushed it off and told him he was being silly. That was the last time I saw him alive. Later that night, he fell asleep at the wheel and plowed into oncoming traffic. After that, I quit my job at the hospital and moved back home. I went and saw my priest at my home church, and he thought I was nuts, but gave me a blessing. That was 9 years ago. I still work as a nurse, but I'm living in California now. I'll never know if the accidents that killed the doctor and Andre were just coincidences. Guess I never will. 5. In 2013, I moved into an apartment in Alma, Arkansas. I'm not sure if this had anything to do with it, but the apartment complex was right next to a very old graveyard. A little history on this apartment complex. I had lived there 3 times before, in 2003, 2006, and 2009. All 3 times I got the same 1-bedroom apartment, number 208. It was always the only 1-bedroom available. Each time I would have strange things happen there. The first time, cabinets would open, things would be in different places, and sometimes, when I take a shower and close my eyes, I'd see the bathroom and shower covered in blood, and blood coming out of the shower. I'd open my eyes and it'd be normal. The first time I lived there, that stuff intrigued me. I only moved out to move in with my girlfriend. Alma has very few options for apartments, and in 2006, when my girlfriend and I split up, I had to go back to the same apartment complex, and lo and behold, the exact same day I split with my girlfriend, the people living in 208 moved suddenly, and for the second time, I got the same apartment as the first time. It seemed a little weird, but I just wrote it off as a coincidence. This time around, things were worse. I'd hear movement in my walk-in closet and living room at night. The shower visions were more intense, and also, this was the year that the Laughing Children incident happened to me. See my other post for a Laughing Children story. And also, I was living here when the sleep paralysis began, a few months after the Laughing Children. My first sleep paralysis episode was terrifying. I was laying asleep next to my new girlfriend, and about 1 a.m., I heard the DVD rack in the living room fall and a lot of DVDs crashing to the floor. I was still half asleep when I looked towards my bedroom door, which I kept shut, and on this night I had accidentally left my bathroom. And I could see the light under my door, but as I turned my head to the direction of the noise and was about to holler out who's there, I heard running footsteps like a kid, and I saw the shadow of feet at the base of my bedroom door in the bathroom light. Then I saw the feet go from being on the other side of my door to being on my side of the door. No filler shadow, just the feet, and in a blink of an eye, they moved from the door to my chest and disappeared. This all happened so fast. I hadn't been able to move or speak, but after seeing the shadow feet on my chest, I went to shake my girlfriend awake, but I couldn't move my arms. So I went to say her name, but I couldn't speak. So in a panic, I tried to sit up, but couldn't move at all. My eyes began to get heavy, and in a second, I was dreaming of a shadow holding me down. Covering my mouth, I fought and widened my eyes, and it was still there. I'm finally able to make a noise, but it's just a raspy, pitiful help that is barely a whisper. And I'm able to slightly move my finger and touch my girlfriend. It's enough, and she opens her eyes and asks me what's wrong. I let out my pitiful help again as I widen my eyes in fear at my chest. My girlfriend starts shaking me, and I don't respond when she slaps me. In an instant, the shadow is gone, and I'm awake, able to move. My girlfriend says she never heard the DVDs crashing, and didn't see the shadow. The DVDs were all still on the rack when I go to check the living room. My girlfriend witnessed, and pulled me out of 3 more sleep paralysis episodes over the next few months, before leaving me because it all freaked her out so bad. And then I moved out. Fast forward to 2009. I had married in 2007, and had a son that same year, and a daughter in 2009. But my wife and I split, and I needed a place to stay, and once again I go back to the same apartment complex. I couldn't afford anything better. Once again for the 3rd time. The only open apartment is 208. I don't want to be homeless, so I ask the landlord if I move into 208. Can it be temporary, and if another apartment opens up, can he let me take it? He says yes, and I move in, but after 2 weeks of bloody visions, noises, and 2 more sleep paralysis episodes, I move out and stay with family. My wife and I get back together. But in 2013, we split for good, and I get split custody, and need a local place to live. And because this time I need a 2-bedroom apartment, and knowing there's no chance of getting 208 because it's 1 bedroom, I go back to the complex and end up getting 210, which is right next to 208. The even number apartments are on the 2nd floor, and odd on the bottom. 210 was the only available 2-bedroom apartment. So I take it, and tell myself at least it's not 208. No, nothing happens here at first, and my kids and I really make it our home. And then it begins. One night I'm in my room, and it's 2:30 in the morning, and I hear my kids banging toys around and giggling in their room. And I hear their TV come on, and it wakes me up. Irritated, I call out, "You guys are supposed to be asleep. Don't make me ground you." The banging and giggling stop, but I still hear the TV going, and I get up and walk to their shut door, still half asleep, and say, "Okay, kiddos, I told you to go back to..." As I begin opening the door, it occurs to me that my kids are at their mom's. I had taken them back to her the evening before. A chill runs down my body as I slowly push the door open to see toys strewn all over and a cartoon playing on the TV. I turn the light on, unplug the TV, then bolt to the living room, shutting their door behind me. I turn all the lights on in the apartment and sit up on edge all night. Nothing else like this happens, but the next week, while my kids were there, I'd catch my 3-year-old daughter talking to somebody when my 6-year-old son wasn't around her, so I asked her who she talked to, and she replied, "My friend, old mom. Her kids got burned up, so she is nice to me because I look like her little girl." My daughter said this word for word, and usually she couldn't talk that plain. I immediately call her mom and ask what she's been watching over there, but her mom says just her cartoons. I once again got a chill down my entire body. My son never saw what Alexis saw. Over the next few months, my little girl continues to talk to and about old mom, sometimes even pointing behind me and telling me old mom is there watching me to make sure I'm a good daddy. Very creepy. Over the past few years, my little girl has gotten to like spooky stuff and is fascinated with scary shows and movies, but at this time, she was only 3 and had never seen scary stuff, so I was really getting concerned and had a hard time sleeping. Then one night, I was reading a kid's book called The Monster in My Closet to my kids. They lay in bed and I was sitting in a chair next to her bed. At the end of the book is a page that says, for the kid reading it, to draw the monster in their closet. This gave me an idea. I told my daughter to draw old mom for me. She sits up, I gave her a pencil and a book, and she says, "Can you move, Daddy? She's behind you and I can't see her." I scoot away a little and my little girl looks in the direction where I sat before, then looks down and draws a little, looks up again, then draws some more and continues to do this until she finishes. She hands me the picture. I look at it and I begin to tremble and my heart races. That weekend we moved to an apartment in the next town over. Some might say it was her imagination and she just made up the drawing, but she was 3, and I believe if she made it up she wouldn't have taken her eyes off the paper as she drew, but she kept looking up as she drew, and that tells me she was looking at old mom while drawing her. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 23. It is a somewhat weary and sleepy Hellfreezer that greets you today, my friends, because as I've mentioned previously, there's work going on in my area, people doing improvements to the houses, and this morning while there has been a lot of noise that's kind of kept me awake, they actually started work on my house. Well, they had actually started work in my house before, but they started work on the roof of my house. And I'm very much a night person, so it was not exactly easy to sleep while they're tearing slates off your roof so they can replace them. So noisy times it was for me, so yeah, I'm probably in for restless and sleepless days, I suppose, since I'm a night person, until this is over. Well, it won't go on forever, and I'm sure it'll look very nice when it's done. I would of course like to say thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in these videos. And I would also like to remind you, if you're not getting notifications or you want to make sure you get notifications for new videos, then please just click on that little bell icon underneath the video, and that will make sure YouTube gives you those notifications. And if not, you can always go follow me on Twitter as a backup. I should probably have been saying that all along, but I was doing okay view-wise. It's just, the little bugs on YouTube that crop up from time to time are kind of starting to hit me now. So just to make sure that you're aware of new videos as and when they go up. That should help. Okay, I'm going to head off for now. Big weekend's work ahead of me, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.